Hey guys, before we start, a quick shout out to Alpha Dog Nutrition for sponsoring this podcast. Alpha Dog products are now available at dusupply.com, and you can use code ALPHADOG15 at checkout for 15% off and a credit for free shipping to try it yourself. Now let's get you to your podcast.
Where's Fielder? He's gone to the dogs.
Welcome, everyone, to the Gone to the Dogs podcast, the home of hard opinions and useless facts and a couple old washed-up hillbillies that like talking about coon dogs. I'm sitting here with the host of the show, Mr. Stephen Fielder, and as always, I'm your co-host, Corey Groover. Steve, what the heck you been up to, man?
Oh, I've been up, as the guys back home in West Virginia say, I've been up to about 5'9", but I'm not going to tell you what. I'm not going to tell you what the weight is. I am heavier than I've ever been in my life, folks. That's an honest fact.
Take it from me, I'd win a blue ribbon at the county fair, so don't worry about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just clean living, Corey. You know, I was thinking about just the other day, just thinking I've got buddies outside the hound world, if you can believe that I've had over the years, college buddies and different ones, guys I went to church with, especially in Kalamazoo when I was there all those 16 years. I had a great church, and my son was growing up, so we did quite a bit of socializing with 2 or 3 groups of couples there that had children the same age as mine. And so, get a little bit of different perspective out there. But without waxing too philosophical here, and as my good departed friend Larry Meeks would say, don't get too deep in the weeds here. He used to always say, that guy's a lost ball in high weeds. Larry had some great sayings, man. One that he said, he'd borrow somebody's knife, and he'd say, man, I could ride to town on the edge of that knife. So dull. Man, what a great guy. I miss him. Larry, I miss you, brother. I love you. Anyway, I was just thinking, about it at the stage of life that I'm in. And, I don't want to be morbid about it, but I know I got way fewer years left than I've already lived. But, I'm at a stage in life where I'm just happy, content. I'm not having to struggle with a job, and trying to perform for a corporation or a boss, although I had great bosses and really enjoyed my career for the most part. But I'm just at a point in life, where everything's just kind of easy. I'm very, very happily married, comfortable, not wealthy by any stretch, but comfortable. And just not too many wants, Ella keeps me well fed, too well fed, as we said. And I have friends like you to talk to and check in on and all. And so life is good for me, just really is. And you're right in the middle with the young family and all of that. And but I can tell life's pretty good for you too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you could see my waistline, you'd say it was real good. For sure. Yeah, it's amazing. I keep telling my wife that every time we have a baby girl, I pack on about 20 pounds. So, I told her, I said, we got to have a boy next time if we're going for round 3. I think you're on mute, Steve.
Well, you know what? I do that when I take a drink. Actually, it's good old Florida artesian well water. Nothing, nothing heavy here, folks.
Oh boy.
But I still have that persistent tick in my throat that it reminds me of Charlie Lewis, down in at the White River. We met a guy, Nubbin and I did, through our desire to hunt out of a boat. Charlie lives in what is called, I think that's called Lower Maddox Bay Road. And now Charlie has since passed away. But he was retired from the phone company. I believe he worked in Memphis. And his retirement home was right on Maddox Bay, which is a loop off of the White River. It looks like a river in of itself. It's wide, and it's not. There's no shoals or rocks in it. It's slow moving, but he had a boat slip there, and he had a boat ramp that we could launch our boat to go coon hunting up the bay. But Nubbin and Charlie got to be good friends because Nubbin, as I've discussed on here before, is quite adept at making homemade wine, especially out of those muscadine grapes there in
Boy.
Alabama, and the scuppernongs and all of that. And Nubbin once told me, he said, Steve, you can make wine out of anything. And lest I paint the wrong image here, Nubbin is definitely not a wino,
Yeah.
but he enjoys making good wine. So he would take Charlie some wine, and Charlie called it elephant repellent. He
Elephant
said,
repellent.
"Yeah," he said, "ever since you've been bringing me this, I have not seen an elephant on Maddox Bay." But he would sit around a fire outside in the evening, have a big 55-gallon drum, and that was the fire pit. And oh, what a joy it was to go and visit with Charlie every year. We would go, and sometimes we'd use his boat slip, and other times we wouldn't. But Charlie was the guy ever since the day I met him that had a tick in his throat. So everything he said, it was, how you doing, Corey? You know? But we had such great times with Charlie, and when he passed, it was such a sad time for us because our trips to White River, we don't get to go see Charlie anymore. But we did visit with his wife some, after he passed, and their daughter, and all, just great people. You meet so many good people. It's just amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, I chased that rabbit all around the barn there to tell you I've got a tick in my throat. So if I'm hacking and all that, you'll know why. But I'll try to keep that mute button on if I can.
We'd appreciate that.
Yeah, well, Corey, before we get going too fast, talking about appreciation, we do want to thank Buddy Woodbury, all the folks at W Hunting Supply, their new sponsor, Alpha Dog Nutrition. There is, if you go on the W Hunting Supply webpage, I believe, there is a code, discount code for the Alpha products. And I don't have it. I should have it here in front of me. But anyway, we certainly do appreciate the sponsors of this program that permit us being on the air. And, I do those question of the week spins, and a good friend, Mark Zepp, ZEPP.com, provides the lifetime coon squallers that we give away in those wheel spins. So anyway, just want to thank the people that make this podcast possible every week. You, just this past weekend as we're recording, held the second phase of your Wags for Kid stud dog auction benefit, where you actually had an event.
Yes, sir.
What happened?
Oh my goodness gracious. I sweated a lot, and came home very tired. Let's put it that way. Yeah, so anybody that remembers us talking about the Wags for Kids stud dog auction that we had online through Facebook back at the beginning of June, late May, beginning of June, you probably remember that you saw advertisements for an event that corresponded with that where we were actually going to award the money that was earned from the stud dog auction to this young man named Jonathan that we were working on benefiting to try to buy a service dog for him. We just had that over the weekend on July 6th, and man, what a rousing success it was. I just blew every expectation we had out of the water. We ended up with 24 dogs in the bench show, and we had 23 dogs in the hunt.
That's awesome.
And I can tell you that we had more people than dogs on the grounds during that UKC licensed event. And I don't know that I've seen that in a good many years. So
yeah,
it was incredible how many people showed up to show their support for Jonathan and show their support for our local club and helping us earn that money. And I'm happy to announce that we did, in fact, meet the goal for Jonathan of raising him $9,000 to purchase his service dog outright. So that was pretty monumental. The stud dog auction really made it possible. And, I just want to tip my hat to everybody who was involved with that or participated with that. That really made the difference, I think. But the response we got at the event was just as encouraging. And
well, that's awesome. I saw the photos of Jonathan interacting with the dogs. He was in some of the photos,
yeah,
I believe. Yeah, and it seemed like he was having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, so Jonathan suffers from autism. He is autistic. So, we had to take some special precautions in the clubhouse and stuff like that to accommodate him. But man, I'll tell you what, once he got into it, once it became his idea to get into it, man, I'll tell you what, he was putting dogs in the treeing contest. He was getting in the win photos, and we actually got him a special award, like a silver plate with the Wags for Kids, monogrammed on it and his name and everything like that. And he just kept asking when he could take his plate home. So that was
that's
fun.
cool. That is too cool. Well, is there an organization that WAGS goes through to purchase these dogs, or they just have a network that they know how to go out and find a particular dog that a beneficiary needs, or do you know how they do that?
So I'm not 100% sure. I know that the Wags for Kids Foundation is its own thing, and they do a lot of the primary fundraising and training of the dogs, from what I understand.
Okay.
And so they work very closely with the kids that become involved in the program. And actually, what was interesting, there must be some sort of subsidiary group that they work with or through, because we had a representative from the Wags for Kids Foundation there at the event, and she made a point of addressing the crowd, and she said, the cost of purchasing a service dog for these kids, because they're in the program, is $9,000. But realistically, once all the politics and stuff get worked out, it's about $35,000 once everything's said and done. So they make it very manageable for these families to be able to afford these service dogs as it is. So to have the support of our hound hunting community coming in behind that and bringing up the tail end there and reaching that goal for them, that was just outstanding.
Absolutely. Well, kudos to everybody that participated in this, and just one more way, that we build good PR with the non-hunting community out there. I know as I worked with the St. Jude hunt when I was with Actually, the St. Jude hunt became a AKC hunt after I went there and was there for a few years. And going to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis and meeting the researchers there and some of the doctors and staff there and seeing their appreciation because that event has just literally raised millions of dollars at St. Jude Coon Hunt each over the years. And man, what a way for us to pay back or
Yeah.
pay it forward or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, Mike Creasy and his group down there have really done a stellar job with that event over the last few decades, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for us in the hound hunting community that when we step out to show our support to our communities and to different people across the country, a lot of times that puts a target on our back, unfortunately. And I know that the St. Jude event has been under the magnifying glass as far as animal rights activists are
Oh, yeah.
concerned and stuff like that, just because of their association with St. Jude.
Yeah.
And it's really a shame that, when a group wants to get out there and do what's right for their community, that they open themselves up to attack.
Yeah.
But, those are the educated risks that we have to take in order to defend our sport. And, those are the ones that we should be taking.
Yeah, well, the St. Jude people, the hospital folks, have long recognized the importance of this event. And I know that it probably becomes somewhat of a PR problem for them at times.
You ain't kidding.
Yeah, but they've stayed the course, and of course I know when they look at those amounts those checks that the coon hunt brings in each year, that's pretty much a no-brainer for them. But Corey, I'm going to jump up on my stump here just for a minute. These groups are always these anti-groups, these Humane Society of the United States, PETA, Fund for Animals, all these people, they do absolutely nothing good for animals. All they do is feed their coffers. And we see the stories in the news, about the kill shelters that they operate and all of this kind of stuff. And it's all smoke and mirrors to raise money. But the people out there that really care about the wildlife resource are the hunters. We demonstrate that every year when we buy a hunting license or when we walk in a sporting goods store and buy a new shotgun or a new rod and reel and pay the excise tax on those items. That's a demonstrative way that we can say we care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And and on top of that, sportsmen and hound hunters especially are the ones that are probably contributing to organizations with some clout like St. Jude, more so than what these animal rights organizations are doing anyways. Otherwise the organizations that are being benefited by the hound hunters or the sportsmen or whatever would listen to their constituents or their patrons, I should say. And we wouldn't have stuff like this. So that's something that you have to keep in mind when you're thinking about making monetary donations or supporting any kind of benefit event. At the end of the day, sportsmen pay the bills. That's for sure.
Well, it was a few years ago that within my own immediate family, we decided we kind of put a cap on what we would spend on each other for Christmas gifts. It's easy to get carried away. At Christmas, little Susie, 16, she gets a new Corvette, and all. Not my family, But we decided we'd put kind of a cap on the amount that we would spend, and then we would each make whatever our hearts dictated for us to do, we would make contributions to charity. And when we have a great one here in the greater Tampa Bay area called Metropolitan Ministries, and they do a tremendous amount of good for people who really need it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but it was easy for me to say, my contributions are going to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital because I've been there 2 occasions where we went there and we were did the pictures and all and received one of the big, I call them Happy Gilmore checks, the big checks and it was just an honor. I know one time Jimmy Phillips, a field rep there from AKC, went with me, and I don't recall who was with me the other time, but as we received those and we're given tours, of the hospital, and we weren't permitted to go up on the very upper floors where the real sick kids are, but we did see many, many of the kids and their parents. And if you can go in there and not come out with without a big lump and moist eyes, you're a stone.
Oh,
That's all I can say for you. You're a stone. But they do such great, great work, and they're successful. Some of those cancers have been reduced now to where, they got almost, up in the 90 percentile on remissions on some of those childhood cancers, which once were, it was almost 100%. It was a death sentence,
yeah.
for the child. So just a great, great thing. And just so to see a group like the Mercer County Coon Hunters come together with this Wags for Kids, is very gratifying. And once again, kudos to you, Corey. I know you're tired,
Yeah.
but
I might add too, obviously, we were still holding a UKC licensed event, and we had to have officials for those events. And actually, every single person that served in any sort of capacity with the event that had to travel there to be with us, they actually donated their time and their money to the event just as much as the club members or any of the participants did. So we had Janet Emery from Indiana judging the bench show. We had Thomas Murphy from Indiana, Pennsylvania, as our master of hounds. We even had UKC field rep Jamie Eastep in attendance, and he gave an opening ceremony for us and offered a little prayer for the event. And every single one of those persons just donated their time because it was a good cause, and I consider them all great friends, and I respect them even more now for what they've done for Jonathan because of that.
well, we hear a lot about that coon hunters today. All they're interested in is showing up 20 minutes before the deadline, dropping their entry fee. Most of that's done ahead of time. Go into the woods. They win. They had a big time. They come back and get the picture taken. If they lose, they go on down the road. And we hear about that. But that aside, that may be getting most of the news. But behind the scenes, the people that are doing the work like that. And you mentioned some people there. They're good friends of mine, and I marvel at how much they do for the sport. Jamie, especially, and Janet, both of them. And I don't know the other gentleman you mentioned, but at any rate, thank you, thank you for what you do for our sport. If it weren't, this is a big volunteer army. I used to tell Fred Miller, my boss at UKC, he'd say, well, why is that club having XYZ events now instead of just UKC events? I said, well, they're coon hunters, Fred. They want to go coon hunting. They don't care whose shingles hanging on the clubhouse door, you know. And it really doesn't, we're all together, whatever KC we like to hunt. We're all together. And that's an old message that I've preached way too many times, but it still remains true. Well, I do want to get a little bit of that plot news out of the way, and thank you. As while we're on that subject, you and John Owens and the people at the Mercer County Club for the nice plaque that Mark and I received. Each received one this week for
Absolutely.
our participation in stud dog auction. So we really appreciate that, and it's right here in my office here. You can see it over my shoulder there,
Looks
Corey.
good.
Oh
It's
yeah.
almost glaring to look at. I don't know
Uh,
if you polished it or what you
I
did.
probably rubbed all the letters off of it, like that person I done trophy I won.
Oh my goodness
Well, you
gracious.
made a trip over to Southwest Ohio. We talked about it the last time you were on. I think it was podcast maybe before last. We talked about you breeding your female Goldie. Did you get that done?
Yeah, officially, the deed has been done. The seeds have been sown, and we're just gonna wait for some rain, and hopefully, we'll get some little puppies that pop out from that. But yeah, big shout out to Bill Scheniger for getting that done for me. He took the reins on that and had Goldie at his house for I think week and a half, 2 weeks, and actually hand delivered her to me at the Wags for Kids benefit event, if you can believe that. And showed up at the event, bought some tickets, bought some food, and headed on home. So that was pretty great of Bill.
Well, the salt of the earth guy. We can't say too much good about Bill. Now,
Oh,
folks,
yeah.
these guys that we're blowing their heads up. Believe me, when we see them face to face, we give them a hard way to go, just like we do anybody else. But no, Bill Scheniger is one of the top of the line guys in our sport, and really, we're fortunate to have him. He's very knowledgeable and very dedicated to his plot hounds, as some of us are. And so, anyway,
I'll
well,
tell you
that's
what,
great.
I always look forward to the opportunities I have to get a nice female bred because, uh, you know, personally, I've always been a female guy. So I've always primarily been on that side of the equation, dealing with stud owners and stud fees and bills for artificial inseminations or what have you. But there's such a wealth of knowledge when they take it seriously, and obviously Bill has made it somewhat of a career out of breeding dogs, and he taught me things that I never knew about breeding dogs and things that I didn't know about canine reproduction in general. And here I am at 31 years old and been doing this game long enough, I should know, right? And I learn something new every time I go through this, and I always can enjoy that aspect of it for sure.
Well, there's always something to learn if we'll just settle down and step back and listen, and we got one mouth and we got two ears, I think maybe God was telling us something there. Need to use those more, or they're more important than the mouth, I guess. Well, great news, great news. Let's look for some of those, as my dad said, those little chipmunks in the whelping box here in about 2 months, huh?
Yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed, hope for the best.
Absolutely. Well, we kind of named this podcast, if we have to put a label on everything, a name or whatever, Summertime Blues. Summertime is here. As we're recording this, it's the 9th day of July. Now, this podcast will be aired a little later on. I believe will be scheduled for July 22nd is when our listeners will be hearing this. And I will take just a brief moment to tell you, Corey, that the podcasts have been doing very well. Um, W Hunting Supply has assembled a team of content providers that really is a balanced effort. It seems by looking at the number of downloads and all. Each one of these providers are pretty much uh, getting the same number of downloads each month, and it's really put the downloads totals for W through the roof. And I talked to Jason Doobie, and I'm not going to steal their thunder because it's not mine to tell. But I think they're going to be making an announcement on the number of downloads that the W Hunting Supply Network has received. Let me just tell you, it's phenomenal.
Oh, man,
You
that's
would
great.
not believe how many people have actually tuned in to a W Hunting Supply podcast. And just thanks to all the guys who are out there providing content. And apparently the podcast sphere out there is receiving it very well because they sure are listening. So that's great and very gratifying because Gone to the Dogs is certainly doing very, very well in that regard. And we're just very grateful for that, for sure. It's summertime. There's a song that says summertime when the living is easy. The fish are jumping and the cotton is high. Well, it's not so easy when you're a coon hunter, is it?
It is not.
I tell you what, no matter how tough summer hunting was over the years, and when I lived in Michigan, it gets hot. You lived up there. You know it gets hot in the summertime.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of water, a lot of lakes, a lot of swamps. Any low ground in Michigan has water in it. So there's mosquitoes. Lots and lots of mosquitoes in Michigan. But on your worst day, in Michigan summer hunting, you can't imagine what it's like in Florida
Oh,
in
man.
the middle of the summer.
You know, you're talking about hunting in the summertime in Michigan. I didn't realize that stinging nettles were a thing until I moved to Michigan and hunted in the summertime. Yeah, I went through my first patch of stinging nettles and I thought I was going to die. It was terrible.
I may have told this story on an old podcast way back, but I think the statute of limitations is probably out on me retelling stories. But as is the custom with the National Redbone Coonhound Association, I think they still have their Redbone Days on the 4th of July or nearby or nearly that weekend. Do they not? Or have they
No.
changed that?
No,
They don't?
I think that was changed. That has to have been 10 years ago, maybe.
Oh, see how far behind I am.
Yeah,
Well, they used to always have it around 4th of July weekend.
you're right.
And one of the finest clubs in Michigan, I thought, and I attended, I guess I visited virtually all the clubs in Michigan when I lived there, was the club at Bellevue, which was from my home in Schoolcraft, which was about 10 miles or so south of Kalamazoo, up to Bellevue was about 50 miles, I believe. And we had National Redbone Days there this one given summer. And I was contacted prior to the hunt by a lady in Georgia that said, my kids are driving me crazy wanting to come to Redbone Days. And apparently they had seen where the red fern grows and all this. And lo and behold, some coon hunter who was, and I don't remember his name, which I could, middle-aged, not an old hunter, but not a young buck either, had agreed to bring these boys to Redbone Days, which that in itself was an undertaking, but they were brothers, and I don't remember their exact ages, but I'm going to say one was probably around 12 and the other maybe 8 or 9. So this fellow contacted me and he said, would it be possible for you to take us pleasure hunting maybe on Thursday night. In those days, I don't think they had the red bone RQE on Thursday night. There may have been the all red hunt, and this could have been Wednesday night. I don't remember. Anyway, I said yes, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Todd Kellum went along with us. Todd was my hunting buddy when I was in Michigan there for several years. He worked in my department there, the field operations department, as it was called then. And so anyway, these kids, they were all excited about going coon hunting. And so we took them hunting. And I had a favorite spot that was pretty easy to tree a coon in there, and the walking wasn't real bad and all. But if the dogs went on the left side of this, there was a swamp that lay back there, and you kind of crested a hill. And then on the left-hand side around through there was one of the thickest patches of stinging nettles you'd ever see. So I told these boys, I said, do not get into those. Do you see these leaves on this right here? Do you see how kind of fuzzy they look and all? Do not get into those. Well, of course, that was like saying sick 'em to a bulldog.
Oh, boy.
They had to try it, you know. And, oh, my goodness, you know, those things are liquid. They feel like somebody poured liquid fire on your arm.
Well, so the worst part about it was getting it on your hands, and then you unconsciously going to wipe the brow of your head from sweat or something like that, and getting it in your eyes. That was the worst part. Oh my goodness!
I never got them in my eyes.
Oh,
but they were like, "Can you wash it off? Can you wash it off?" I said, "Well, number one, there's no water except back here in this swamp, so I don't have any water for you. We may have had some drink, may have had a bottle of water.
yeah.
I don't even know if bottled water had been invented then, but needless to say, they learned what stinging nettles were. And it's interesting, if you get, I think it's the first issue of, maybe the second, of John Wick's book, Walk with Wick, the Tree Dog Encyclopedia. He shows a picture of Mark Blount of Three Rivers, Michigan, standing in a patch of stinging nettles with his arms raised and a pair of wick chaps on to illustrate, you know, that the wick chaps, you know. And he mentions that this was in a Missouri or Arkansas river bottom or whatever. And dear friend John wouldn't contradict him at all, but that picture was taken by me in that patch of nettles in Michigan.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the most useful pieces of sage wisdom that I ever got was when I was well amongst the stinging nettles and came out scratching and hollering. There's a redbone man that lives in Vicksburg, Michigan. His name is Scott Haynes, and he was the son of old Stub Haynes. And Scott introduced me to a little plant called jewelweed. And jewelweed is, I don't remember all of the scientific information he gave me on that, but all I remember is it grows around water. And you'll often find it around things like poison ivy and stinging nettles. It has small orange flowers on it. And if you go and pick that and you take that and you mash it up in your hands and you rub it all over the affected area, it all but takes everything away. And
well, I never heard of that.
Oh, jewelweed?
No. I knew Stub Haynes. Mm-hmm. Stub had a very interesting, when he passed his funeral, the coon hunters were all in their lights and bibs and I think maybe there was some mules or whatever, but the procession from the church to the cemetery was quite moving, you
Yeah.
know, when Stubb passed away. He was a loyal Redbone man.
Hmm.
He really was, and I'm sure Scott probably was too.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
I didn't know that jewel weed. Okay.
there might be a more technical term for it, but that's what Scott called it, and that's what I call it to this day. But apparently, talking about summer hunting, what I learned, the second thing that I learned from moving from Pennsylvania to Michigan is the poison ivies are just slightly different enough that your body has no idea how to fend it off. So I got a good case of poison ivy right on my forearm. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it blew up like a balloon. It was itchy. It just the nastiest thing you ever saw in your life. And I was over at Scott's house one day, and Scott was looking at my arm, and he was like, "What the hell is wrong with your arm?" You know, and I was like, "Well, I got a bad case of poison ivy." Well, that is when Scott took me down to the lake closest to his house. And he's like, "I'm going to teach you about jewelweed." And I was like, "Okay, I'll try anything once at this point." So we went down there was a lake just right down the road from his house. And we parked alongside the road. And he said, "You just walk down to the edge of the lake there, and there's a patch of it growing right there." And it wasn't like it was an uncommon plant. You could find it pretty readily
Mm-hmm.
in Michigan. But it just happened to be down there, and he knew where it was at. So I marched myself down there, and he said, "Pick as much of it as you can carry." And I picked as much of it as I could stand. And Scott was real big into old Indian wisdom, if you
Mm-hmm.
will,
Mm-hmm.
and the medicinal stuff that came along with that. And what we did was we made a little, I don't know what they call it, but like a little pack with the jewel weed, and
They call that a poultice.
yeah, we made a poultice, and we mushed it up, and we put it on my arm, and then wrapped a bandage around it, and I let that set overnight. And I'll be darned if that wasn't gone the next day. Damn near gone, the whole thing. I couldn't believe it.
I'm reading. I do a lot of reading anymore, and something that people may not know about me, but when I was in school, I was severely affected by what they would now call ADHD. I could not concentrate. I read an article the other day of someone describing it as you start to read a page and you get maybe a third down the page, and then all these other things come into your mind. And you may continue to read the words and scan the page, but all these other things are competing for your attention. And then so maybe you stop and you say, "Wait a minute, I missed that. I'll go back and I'll read that again." And I read it again. And then by the time I've got to the bottom of the page, I've actually read that whole page, but I've probably only retained about a third of it, of the information. And that's what people who suffer from attention deficit syndrome or disorder, that's what they go through. Typically when I was a kid, it was just, "Oh, you're not concentrating, you know, you're having trouble concentrating." Well, it's true, you do. But parents out there that have children that are affected this way will know what I'm talking about. But anyway, now I don't have anything competing for I can sit down with a good book, a good novel or whatever, and I can just soak that thing up like a sponge. And I do quite a bit of reading. And I'm reading this one author, and I think his last name is Driscoll, but I could be wrong, but he writes Westerns. And he writes from the position of a couple of guys that left Philadelphia and traveled out to the far west, to the Rocky Mountains. And they encounter all these different Native American tribes. And they marry Shoshone women. And And all through his books, there are stories of these natural medicines, and all. And one that was within my family that we always used and always had a little bottle of it is golden seal. Do you know what that is? Commonly called yellow root.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Do you know what it's used for?
I don't.
It's a little root that you can dig out of, and when you crack open the outer covering of the root, the pulp inside that root is a bright golden yellow,
Okay.
very rich. It works wonders on any kind of canker sore or sore in your mouth or on your lips or whatever.
Oh, no kidding.
Amazing. It's very, very bitter to the taste. Okay. You can take just a little piece of that root. You can leave the whole part on it. Fine. Just stick it, in your mouth, maybe in the corner, like put a little pinch between your cheek and gum.
Yeah, right.
Talk about a dip, maybe.
Yeah.
I would use it like you would a dip, but it'd be a solid piece. And man, that'll cure a mouth sore overnight. I mean, just take the soreness out, clear it, heal it up,
That
So
rem-
there's a
that
go ahead.
reminds me of willow. Willow being full of salicylic acid, and that's
Okay.
where they get aspirin from.
Oh,
So if you ever have
So-
a toothache or whatever, supposedly you can go chew on a willow twig, and that'll
I
help
gotcha.
a little bit. So,
Well, the Native Americans, I guess just through experimentation, but these indigenous people knew how to use these things. They couldn't go down to the corner Walgreens, or so.
but to our point, Steve, the Native Americans didn't have to learn this in the spring or the fall when they were coon hunting. They had to learn it in the summertime when they were in the heat of battle against the
Yeah.
stinging nettles and the mosquitoes and the
Oh, yeah.
toothaches and everything, So I
Yeah,
guess that's the
yeah.
one silver lining to summer hunting is there are natural remedies that are growing around you.
Well, that's an interesting thing right there, and I did not know that about this. What do you call it? Jewel weed?
Jewel weed, yes.
Oh, okay.
I
Well,
think
I'll have
that's
to look that up.
I think that's a nickname for it. I
Mhm.
don't know that that's the official name of the plant, but
Well, there's a weed or a cure for those mosquitoes. It's called DEET,
the deep plant.
the DEET plant, and there's also the permethrin. Is that the right?
Permethrin, yeah.
Yeah, that stuff I understand is pretty. You got to kind of be careful with that stuff. But I've got a good friend in North Carolina, and he and I hunted together in those North Carolina summers, which are almost as bad as Florida. Courtney Risk, and Courtney, he went through all these military schools on survival. I think he teaches that stuff now, but I mean, he knows all that stuff. We were out summer hunting in Raleigh, and there was some big black ants, and he said, those things taste just like citrus, Steve. And I said, "Oh, really? I'll take your word for that, Courtney." But he did. He taught me into tasting one, and it did. It had a citrus taste to it. But I didn't, that I was one and done on the ants.
So being that you live deep in the South,
yeah.
what and I think over the years we've always heard the complaints from people from the South that there aren't any major coon hunting events in the South for the most part besides like Grand American or Southeastern Treeing Walker Days, and everybody's argument to that is, well, because we don't want to hunt in the south in the summertime. So how long is the summertime, air quotations, as far as, what's that range look like for you as far as being able to duck the snakes and the gators and the poisonous plants and all that kind of stuff? Like what range of time are you hunting down there the most?
Um, November, December, January, February, probably those 4 months
That's prime
are the
time.
decent months. Yeah, and as we mentioned on podcast the other day, I think it was you and me that about the orange groves,
Hmm.
and the wintertime the oranges are ripe. They ripen over the winter months, and so yeah, that's the best time. That's when the humidity does give us a bit of a break.
Hmm.
Um, you've got vegetation year round down here. Our grass grows all year, although it does slow down. I admit I'm a lazy guy. I have a lawn service because it's very economical here to
Hmm.
do so. And, our guy goes to twice a month, usually, I guess, in November, maybe by the end of October. And but otherwise, the grass gets mowed weekly.
Right.
Uh, you have to continually, if you have any shrubs or bushes in your yard, you have to continually trim them and uh, you know it, this is a tropical climate down here, so everything grows, and especially bugs of every description. So, but yeah, it's really a wintertime thing, and you think, well, April, it starts getting warm where I am here in April.
Yeah.
And then our hurricane season starts in June and runs through November. That's when
Oh,
the
yeah.
storms come. And our prayers out to the folks down in Texas that just recently went through this burl that came up through there. And I saw Sandy Hintz posting some photos. She's with Kelly's K-Light. Her dad was Mike Kelly. Uh, with a huge tree blown over in her yard. Thankfully, there was no damage to their home or anything like that. But yeah, but yeah, it's a that's about all you get down here. Otherwise, it's going to be hot. And some of these guys are tough, and they're younger guys. Those boys that hunt with Ike Rainey up around Ocklawaha there and out of the Ocala area. They hunt all summer.
Right.
Oliver Wynn and Malcolm Raines and those guys, they all hunt through the summertime, but it takes a tough hunter down here to hunt straight through the summer.
So, what about snakes? What's the time
How
period
many
for
you want?
snakes? Well, not too many. But what's the time frame for snakes? Because
Uh,
I would say that 90% of the coon hunters that are going to come to the South and hunt any time of the year are going to be more concerned about snakes than they are gators, hurricanes, or the like.
well, I guess that's snakes are a mindset. I
Oh, are
never,
they?
yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah.
never heard that
Well,
before.
if you don't look for them, you won't find them usually.
Okay.
You know, and since I've been down here, I started hunting down here in the '60s when I first came to college down here, and I hunted with John Miller around the Tampa area, and he was originally from Ohio, and when the weather would be real hot and there would be a drought pretty much like we have experienced here recently, the water puddles up in these bay heads and all, and he'd say, Steve, let me go into that tree first. I'll see if there's anything there. And several times I saw him come back out with his machete with a cottonmouth draped over it, that was probably 4 or more feet long. And the snakes are there, but most of these guys that hunted Florida for a long time, they've had very few uh, dogs bitten by snakes. I'd say the guys that live in the hill country of Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, West Virginia, western North Carolina, they encounter more snakes in the summertime in terms of copperheads. Occasionally there'll be a timber rattlesnake, which is he's a bad dude. You know, you don't ever want to get bit by a rattlesnake. You don't want your dog to be bit by a rattlesnake. But other than hunting West Texas in the Air Force and in some hunts down there when I saw lots and lots of rattlesnakes, you just don't see them.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned personally with gators around water than I am with snakes.
Okay.
I got Hoss, the old Hoss dog I had, the first winter I hunted down here after I moved here. I got him bitten by a cottonmouth, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
winter. It was wintertime.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was wintertime. So they do go in, you know, I guess they go down in the mud or whatever when it gets real cold. They do. And we say real cold, you know, when we get a week that we've got a morning or two that's down, you know, in the 30s where we might get a frost, that's cold weather for down here.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So Pennsylvania, on the flip side of that equation, we barely have any venomous snakes or snakes that you have to worry about, anyways. The two most common would be copperheads and timber rattlesnakes, and where I'm at, you're not going to find either of them. I've been hunting a long time, and I've never seen a copperhead, anyways. But I'll tell you one cool story I have from my childhood, and I don't have anything to verify this information, but there is an endangered species of rattlesnake that lives supposedly in our county, and it's only in the western side of the state where I'm at. It's called the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake, and
Have those in Michigan too.
yeah,
Yeah, they're
so
short, they're small
right,
snakes. Yeah,
so that snake is going to be congregated in marshy areas, swampy areas. That's a I don't know what the technical term for it is, but they are a fan of water. Let's put it that way.
Well, there's
So
a little rattlesnake down here called a pygmy rattler that
okay,
the guys talk about, and they say they're pretty nasty.
oof.
You know, they're aggressive. Yeah.
So when I was a kid, I actually stumbled across. I used to hunt in a beaver swamp for the most part. I hunted a patch of river bottom that was probably 300 or 400 acres, and then there just so happened to be a big flooded timber beaver swamp kind of in the center of it. And I remember one night distinctly, I would hear these sounds that sounded like tiny little rattles out in the swamp, in different spots. And I never knew what it was. And one night, I came across a snake in that swamp. I couldn't verify to you whether it was a Massasauga or not, but it had a rattle on the end of its tail, just a real short rattle on it. And
It was some kind of rattlesnake then.
well, yeah. So, but I'm convinced that I used to hear them down in the swamp for years after that, because I'd only ever seen the one. And I was convinced that I could hear them down in that swamp. They'd just give a little shake here and there, and I don't know if it was my unconscious mind reminding me to stay vigilant, or if I was actually hearing them. But I like to think that I was hearing them call back and forth to each other as a kid. So,
Well, in the rural areas where I live, guys would get their dogs bitten by copperheads in the summertime. Typically would get bit around the head somewhere, and there was a common saying that their heads would swell up like a football.
oof.
Copperhead will not typically kill a dog. It just makes them sick, and they do swell. When Hoss got bit by cottonmouth, I did take him to a vet. I ended up taking him to one of these emergency vet places. I did not get the that clotbuster shot, that anti venom shot, because I discussed with the doctor, and they did antibiotics, and I imagine they did some Benadryl, maybe some Dex, and is that Dex or Drex? I've never used this stuff. What is it they call it? Drex or something?
I think it's Drex, yeah.
Drex, yeah. But snakes are out there, um, but you know, with the footwear that we have nowadays and the chaps and things like that, it's going to take a pretty big snake and a pretty. I know I'm probably going to get mail on this, but one of these big old flat-headed Eastern diamondback rattlers, I'm sure can puncture those chaps and boots. I would imagine, and
Well, so you were talking about the Bellevue Club in Michigan,
mhm.
and since we're talking about snakes and hunting in the summertime,
I don't like
um,
spiders and snakes.
yeah.
There's a guy here in Winter Haven, Florida, wrote that song.
Oh man,
You remember that?
no, that must be an old song.
No, it's an old song. Yeah, I can't
Uh,
remember his name right now.
so I remember one year I was out at Redbone Days when it was in Bellevue, and like you said, it was 4th of July weekend. And you've seen the water racing facilities they have
Oh
there,
yeah.
where they have kind of a long, narrow pond that's fenced in, and
Hmm.
it's kind of right up against the woods, and there's some brush and stuff over there. Well, we were all standing around talking about the hunt the night before, and these two kids are just slopping wet. They come running up from that pond, and they killed a snake down in there, and they brought it up with them to the clubhouse there, and we had about half a dozen Southern boys that were hanging around us talking to us, and you should have seen them fly. I mean, fly out of there because they thought them boys had killed a cottonmouth. And here, what they had done is they killed probably the biggest northern water snake I'd ever seen in my
Yeah,
life.
there's some big water snakes there.
Yeah.
You'll see them around the water. Uh, you know, there's a funny story. Are you done with that
Oh yeah,
story?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we're over at Onstead at a PKC Pro Hunt,
Okay.
and Tamiko Johnson from over around lives over around, I think, the Flint area, maybe Detroit. Tamiko, we all called him Marty, and they learned that he was afraid of snakes. So someone had killed a snake there at the Onstead Club, and Junior Jackson. People remember Junior and Doug Jackson, especially back from the old days of PKC and the organization before that, and I can't remember the name. Folks, I'm getting old. I am getting old. But anyway, Junior had taken this snake and rigged it somehow. When Marty opened his tailgate, that snake would just flop right out on the tailgate there.
Oh.
And so they had kind of gotten not conspicuous, but a bit of a crowd around to see how Marty was going to react when he opened his tailgate and saw that snake. Well, Marty is a very agile young man. He when that tailgate opened and that snake rolled out there on the tailgate, like he did like 3 hops and he was on top of the cab of the truck. The first was from the ground to the tailgate, from the tailgate to the top of the dog box, from the top of the dog box to the top of the cab of the
Oh
truck.
man.
It was like bong, bong, bong. It was like a
Well,
pogo.
that just goes to show you how important the region of the country you're raised in has an effect on you, because I've always had a love for snakes. I will catch a snake quicker than anything. I love
Mm,
holding them, looking at them, that kind of thing, but I wasn't raised to fear them either,
yeah.
because we don't have very many dangerous snakes up here, obviously.
Well, all the years I hunted in Michigan, and back to our topic of summer hunting, I hunted through the summer in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I learned that just the other day that they changed the opening date or the closing of the quiet time. They always closed hound hunting in around the 15th of April, and it used to run to the 15th of July when I was there. Now, I understand a few years ago they changed that to July 8th. So those guys just yesterday, as we're recording this, I saw where Rob Giddings up around well, what's the town where he and his dad lives? Starts with an M. It's getting late, Corey. I better quit.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, he mentioned the fact that the running season had opened, but we could in summertime. I never thought anything about sitting down in the woods and leaning up or using a tree for a backrest. When I was waiting on a dog to come in or waiting for a dog to strike or whatever. I wasn't concerned about that. I would not sit down without checking the area over pretty good when I was back home in West Virginia. We had copperheads where I lived, where my dad did a good bit of bear hunting in the summertime in Kanawha County. They had rattlesnakes, lots of timber rattlesnakes. And my dad would carry a Ruger single six 22 with rat shot in it, and shoot those rattlesnakes along the pathways. There was two tracks. There's a lot of little roads that went back to gas wells and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And as Dad got older, he just kind of patrolled those roads. If John Harris, his buddy, who was like a deer in the woods, had gone maybe to the dogs and Dad didn't go, he would be on snake patrol, But summertime hunting is inconvenient. It's not comfortable. The outside forces that are involved make it less than pleasurable. And the older we hunters get, the less pleasurable that is. But if you want to keep a dog ready, my problem was, my breed days was always in the first weekend in August. And so if I wanted to have a dog ready for plot days, I had to be out there hunting quite regularly through July.
Man.
And my idea was to come home. My wife would go to Florida with my son and spend usually the month of July and with her mother. And so I'd eat my dinner when I came home from work and go to bed and set the clock for 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'd get up and then I'd drive out west of town to one of my spots and I would hunt, for a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours. Come back home, maybe get a little nap and a shower before time to go to work. But, I just wonder how many guys are actually out there training in the summertime nowadays. I know some are, but I
Well,
just wonder how many are.
I would say a lot of people are going to be hunting by necessity too because of land access. Comparatively speaking, it's harder to get into, a parcel of land to hunt, during prime time deer season or what have
Mm-hmm.
you. And in most places, deer season goes from September to, February and some or January, February time frame. So, I would imagine that a lot of hunters hunt in the summertime by necessity. I personally don't find it very conducive for pup training if you wanted to, narrow that field down a little bit. But, that's just my own opinion.
Well, there's two ways to look at it. I know when I was hunting quite frequently in the summertime, you know, in Michigan, especially, people would tend to have their windows open at night, uh, making it easier for them to hear the dogs barking. Um, rural people don't always have central air. And that was one of the factors. Another deterrent for the working man is the hours with daylight saving time. You can't get to the woods early enough. You're just getting to the woods in the summertime at a time that you'd probably be thinking about quitting in the winter. When
Right.
you go out at 5:30 and hunting by 10 o'clock, you're ready to go back home. As we used to say, we go home and watch the news if you want to. After hunting. But so it's an entirely different ball game. And one thing we haven't touched on is summertime hunting can be very, very hard on the dogs. And with all
Yes.
these tick-borne diseases that we have now, it becomes even more so. We didn't used to have all those tick-borne diseases in our dogs back in those days. We worried about heartworms, so we gave them a preventative. And ivermectin came along, and that was like a godsend, because we didn't have to give them, the Caricide or whatever we were doing for heartworm prevention. So you've got that aspect, and then you've got the heat factor. These dogs, especially in Florida, in some of these jungles that you tree in, there's no air in there. It's like you're in a hermetically sealed chamber.
Oh, yeah.
You can see the steam rolling off the dog's back. And especially if they've barked very hard and very long without water, there's the danger of a heat stroke. So.
Yeah, I have actually seen that play out firsthand. I remember years ago I was judging a night champion cast. It was a 3-dog cast, and we had 2 big male dogs in the cast, and we had this little female, and I think they called her Sunny or something like that. But anyways, what ended up happening was the dogs were they hit a hot track going through a soybean field. And at that particular time of the year, the soybeans were pretty high. They were probably about knee height or better. And the dogs got going into the soybean field, and the big males, they could pick their head up and get air above the beans. But that little female, she ran all through that bean field, and she, wasn't nearly the size the males were to get her head up over the beans. And eventually, and I think this was back when Garmin's just became a thing. So we're talking, Astro 220s or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we hadn't heard from the dog for a while or whatever. And we ended up scoring those 2 big males. And here to come to find out, she had collapsed in the middle of that bean field on that track.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to rush her back to the truck and do everything we could to save her, from crossing the Rainbow Bridge. But luckily, she didn't die from that, obviously, or probably wouldn't be telling the
There
story.
can be side effects from heat stroke, and I've seen it in dogs. I've seen it manifest. A dog one time got too hot in doing field trialing and type events and all, and it affected the dog. The dog would hold her head sideways after that incident, and never could seem to just get it together, and unfortunately she eventually had to be put down. But heat stroke is a very serious thing, which brings up the thing that, we definitely have to carry water for our dogs in the summertime, especially. Should do it year round. The dog needs to be hydrated. And one of the things that I learned going to the Purina seminars, as I have over the years, where the media has been invited to come and to sit in on these various working dog seminars, is the use of glycerin in the water to help carry the moisture into the cells the
No
dog.
kidding.
And yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. Purina, Dr. Arle Reynolds from Anchorage, Alaska. He's a sled dogger, a musher. Last time I had Arlie on a podcast, he was all hyped up about coming to Autumn Oaks. So far, he hasn't made it, but anyway, very very useful information uh, about that. But we definitely have to hydrate the dogs. The dogs can go without food much longer than they can without water.
Do you remember how much glycerin to how much water?
No, I don't, Corey, but I can find that. I can go back through my notes, and I think I can find that information for you, and I will, and we'll try to share it with our listeners when
Yeah,
I
that
do.
might be a good topic of conversation for the coon hunting conversations page. You let us know what your favorite summertime hunting stories are, whether they deal with stinging nettles or rattlesnakes or what have you. Let's hear about them, and maybe we'll talk about them on here a little bit.
Oh yeah, well, those nights, hunting in the summertime, mosquitoes, heat. Fog sometimes, there's just all kinds of opportunities out there to get the, as we said with our title, the summertime blues. But we love to listen to a hound. We love to listen to the call, the full cry of the hound on a tracker tree. So we get out and we endure these types of things, and some would call us crazy, and I suppose we are in a sense. But that's our life. It's a lifestyle, and well, I invite you also, as Corey has said, if you've got a good summertime hunting story, drop it in a post on Coon Hunting Conversations in Facebook. And there's about 11,400 members there in that group. It's a freebie. You just get in, sign in, answer a few questions, and we'll get you right in, invite you to contribute. Well, Corey, I think the old voice is about shot for another episode. I guess I'm going to have to quit this sooner or later
Oh no.
if his voice doesn't get better because it's aggravating for sure. But I always enjoy visiting with you here on the front porch at the Gone to the Dogs what Emporium or whatever we've got going here. I said this week as I was writing show notes for the episode that's airing now that the rocking chairs were buzzing like the treadle wheel on Grandma's sewing machine. Back when she was sewing those quilts on the farm back there. We got the rockers going. We got the the bug zappers.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
there's the thing. Do they still make those things? You still have bug zappers?
I haven't seen somebody with one in a long time. I see those tennis racket ones nowadays where
Yeah,
people take a
yeah.
swing at them. Yeah.
And there's also a kind that you can carry. What is that? Thermo something?
Thermocell.
Thermocell. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
What
got
do
me one of those.
you do? Does that work pretty good?
Yeah, I primarily use it fishing. If I'm gonna go fishing, I bust out the Thermocell. I don't use it coon hunting too much. It's a lot to keep track of. You put it in the wrong pocket or lose track of it, you're gonna heat your bum up, and I don't care for that too much. So
Well, that reminds me of the days in the old wheat lights with the liquid acid. They'd eat the seed out of your Carhartts. You'd be sitting there and you feel something kind of burning.
mhm.
And I knew Randall Rutherford. Some of the listeners will remember Randy. He hunted a red dog named Geronimo in the Purina race and was quite successful with it. And Randy and I used to hunt together quite a bit when I first moved to Michigan. And he went to a night hunt one night. He worked for General Motors, so that friends and family plan or whatever, he always drove a nice truck. He had a brand new one, and somebody got in the truck with that wheat light and ate a big hole right in the upholstery of his new truck. Not
That's
good.
terrible.
So anyway, folks, you see, we old timers. Corey's a young guy. We paved the way for you guys, right? With all these, and now you got these fancy gadgets and all this stuff, but if you get out there in the summertime, those mosquitoes, they're still old school. They still go for the jugular. Corey, I'm going to wrap this thing up, buddy, unless you got something you just can't stand to hold in any longer.
No, it's been good talking to you and
Yeah.
getting together again, and looking forward to what kind of adventures we can get on next time, you know?
Oh, yeah. Well, one thing breeds another, and so, folks, this has been the Gone to the Dogs podcast. Your host, Steve Fielder, with my partner from the great state of Pennsylvania, Corey Groover. We're both ex-UKC hands. We both spent a time of our lives working at the United Kennel Club, and so we revert to some of those stories from time to time. But Corey will continue to be a regular on the show, and we're very happy to have him. Until next week, if someone asks you where is Steve and Corey, tell them that they're on the porch. They're too smart to go to the dogs in this heat. Good night, Corey. It was a great time to spend with you, buddy.
Absolutely. You take care too, Steve.
All right. Folks, we'll see you next week with the Gone to the Dogs podcast.